morning, everyone, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 148, and as you can see from the title, this will be my fourth Jonathan Peters video. So I think at this point it's safe to say that Jonathan Peters was a big influence on me, as you can tell by the hour and a half of content that I've already made for him. Today's episode is titled Dirty Secrets, and I was kind of toying around with the idea of calling it Haunted House, but I'm going to stick with Dirty Secrets. I think that's a little bit more of an attention-grabbing title. And before I get started on the Jonathan Peters concept that I want to talk about today, I want to acknowledge my new background. I'm in the same room, but I moved my music setup down here. And I have to say that this is the best music setup that I think I've ever had in my life in terms of just the convenience of it, how nice it looks, and I have everything anchored to the wall, so it's really firm. When you go to mix on the turntables, there's no wobble, and it just gives it like a really nice, precise feeling. Also, the sound in this room is awesome. I have a couple of Mackie MR8s kind of like in opposite corners of the room, and it just sounds great. So anyways, on to the Jonathan Peters Dirty Secret concept. I was thinking about how to approach this, and I think it makes sense to start with how things work now and then sort of compare that to the period of 2001 to 2003 when I had my Sound Factory experiences. So now if you go out in modern times, if you hear a club track that you like, you can just pull your phone out, use Shazam, and usually I would say like 98% of the time you can get the ID for any song, right? So the idea of having anything be a mystery, the only way to really pull it off is to make your own track and not upload it to any like Beatport-like service or SoundCloud to where Shazam can, I guess, grab it. It basically has to be completely encapsulated in your environment and not shared with anybody. But back in the day when Jonathan Peters was ruling Sound Factory, the DJs that played at the biggest clubs like Danny Tenaglia, Victor Calderone, Junior Vasquez, Jonathan Peters, they operated on having their own secret sound. And they had exclusives, and the premise was, and Danny Tenaglia has really stuck to this, is if you want to hear my special sound, you have to come see me, right? So that was like kind of the allure. It deprived you of getting overexposed to a lot of the tracks, which then kind of made them special, right? It's kind of like in romance, you want what you can't have, or you want more of what you can't have, what's not readily available to you. So I have 5 records for you here today. Actually, I think I might have 6 in the pile that are basically records that without Jonathan Peters would be in relative obscurity. And as I'm looking at this, actually everything in my pile is still relatively obscure, except for the fact that Sound Factory fans know them and love them. So it's like within the greater dance music scene, $5 records. Within the context of somebody that went to Sound Factory every week for 4 years straight, these are like biblical absolute mainstays. If you don't know them, it's like, were you even at the parties? Like they're that famous within this tiny cult realm that we know as Sound Factory fans. So the first one that I want to present to you is one that I think truly represents Jonathan's like evil dark side. There's a lot of pictures of Jonathan with the devil horns like kind of like edited in and such, and there's a reason for that. It's because he was playing tracks like this. This is Clemens Neufeld, who is an Austrian techno producer, and he did this track called Bach auf Rock, and it's on this label called Giant Wheel, which is a German techno label. But look at the cover art for this, right? Look how like hippie and stoner this looks. Would you ever think, if you saw this in a record store, would you ever think that this was gonna sound like dirty 2002 progressive house, fused with just dark house elements? I mean, would you ever, like, I would never think that. I mean, even looking at this, it's like the The art does not match the sound at all. It's so odd. And the other thing is, I thought, well, hey, Bach Off Rock is a great track. I'm gonna check out some of the other tracks that came out around the same time on Giant Wheel and see what I think. And there's nothing that even sounds remotely close to this. There's nothing that is good, honestly. No offense to Clemens, but this is like the gem out of this era of his catalog. And Bach Off Rock you'll probably recognize famously from many Sound Factory nights, or the Jonathan Peters tribute video with Christy Lee where she was featured and they were interviewing different Sound Factory like fans and people that went on a regular basis. And this is like the kind of like a theme song that's operating within that clip. So this is Clemens' Neufeld Bach Off Rock and one of Jonathan's most dirty, evil moments. And speaking of secret remixes and mashups, which is really what Sound Factory operated on, breaking new vocals, right? Here is a remix that ended up turning into a mashup. So the original track is by a duo called Laid, and in preparing for this episode, I was looking at Laid on Discogs, and I saw that that's actually an alias for Cuba Computers, the famous, what I think is like a famous Shinichi record, one of the best records in the Shinichi catalog. Their Haunting Me track with the male vocal in the Chus and Ceballos remix. Laid is actually the same duo as Cuba Computers. And remixing Laid here is Robbie Rivera, who I'll admit I have pretty mixed feelings on. Robbie Rivera, if you look at his catalog from the late 90s to the mid 2000s, was just producing, oh my gosh, he's got so many releases. And he, to me, was like pretty commercial leaning. I mean, it's not like he didn't have his moments of justifiable club music for the underground. I mean, Feel This was a good tribal record. I'm not going to hate on that. And he kind of had a period of really nice, dark, like tribal sessions, remixes, maybe around 2001. There's this one here, the No More Games remix. There's the Victoria Beckham, Not Such an Innocent Girl, 3 a.m. remix. There's the remix of 68 Beats. Hey DJ, I got a track for you tonight. That was a double 12 that Robbie did a remix on. That track, Laid, the remix of Laid No More Games is like really one of the best ones out of that segment. And I think, like I said, represents some of the best dark music out of Robbie's catalog. But at the same time, that's not, the track in and of itself isn't what made it famous at Sound Factory. Where this became like super over the moon famous is when Jim Hines and or Jonathan Peters, I'm not sure who were the ultimate masterminds behind this, somehow realized or got the idea to fuse this with the Cutting Crew 80s song, I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight. And I'm not sure, every time I try to talk about like keys and harmonics on this channel, I end up being wrong. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not sure if the keys of No More Games is exactly the same as Cutting Crew, Died in Your Arms, or if it's just a perfect harmonic blend. But either way, in the segment where this track melts into the Died in Your Arms melodic sequence, I mean, it's really one of the greatest moments in Sound Factory like custom music history. And you'll hear here in the sample, I'm going to give you the actual Jim Hines version of this that I think was the one that was played at Factory. I mean, there might be other versions, but you'll just hear the absolute musical genius in this.
Something you said, I just died in your arms tonight. I just died in your arms tonight. It must have been something you said, I just died in your arms tonight. I just died in your arms tonight. Must have been something you said, I just died in your arms tonight. I just died in your arms tonight. Must have been something you said, I just died in your arms tonight.
And like I said, Jonathan was known for his dirty sound. And what better place to look for dirty sounds than the S&M double CD that came out? On disc 2 of that CD, I think it's disc 2. It might be disc 1. Either one, either way, it's the beginning of one of those two. Jonathan has his Devious Activities monologue. I don't know if that's his voice or somebody else's voice pitched down, but somebody did the Devious Activities kind of like evil monologue intro, and then Jonathan faded it into this little sneaky bugger of a record. This is E.M.P's Wanjiru the African on Bush. Now, I'll take an aside here. This is literally the only Bush record that I have in my entire collection. Bush is primarily like a mid-90s heavy techno label, and I like, it's all like Dave Clark and Timo Maas and that type of sound with just like big cliched techno elements, and it's like the anti-me. It's really not me at all. But here, this one's like the only thing out of their catalog that I ever heard that I actually wanted to have on my shelf. And Wanjiru the African is, like I said, it mixes with that Devious Activities vocal just because there is just something grimy about the drums. If you listen to the drums in this, I mean, it sounds like somebody was actually playing them live to create the sample and the loop. And when you hear it, I think even in the context of the S&M CD, you got to hear it on a system, because it's not just the mid-level drums that make this track kind of evil and dark. It has a really good tech house bass line. And the fact that it kind of straddles some kind of weird border between tech house and tribal is what makes this actually palatable for me. Whereas everything else on Bush is like cringe, and I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But like I said, leave it to Jonathan to take a relatively obscure record and make it into a notorious Sound Factory mainstay. There's some records to me that literally cannot be played outside of Sound Factory without sounding ridiculous. The first one that comes to mind is Madam versus Benny Mays' Deep Chemical. I honestly can't imagine a place to play that record where that makes sense outside of there. I mean, in people's homes and maybe at a classics party, of course, everybody would get it. But to try to play that now to any crowd, if you were playing it to people that weren't Sound Factory goers, I don't see it working. And I'll say the same thing for this. This is John Chiafoni, I think is how you pronounce his name. I was trying to look that up. John Chiafoni is a New York producer that made a crazy, when you talk about like dark, dirty house, I mean this is the absolute epitome of it. When I think of the Sound Factory main floor at 3 or 4 in the morning and the speakers just rolling and the subs hitting, I mean, what better track to play here than Chiaffone's Thunder? When you listen to Thunder, I mean, it's such an odd and peculiar record, and like I said, as cool and as dope as it is, I can't picture bringing it outside of the context of Sound Factory because it's like it just wouldn't work there. On the flip side of Thunder, which is one of the most dark, sinister house records that I can think of out of my entire collection, is like the super daytime, cheery, breezy, and very high class Thinking of You on the flip side. So John Chiaffone showing off his versatility here, and Jonathan Peters again showing off his ability to grab a relatively obscure, kind of dusty record and make it into a monster. For people that are like super fans of this track, I feel like this track has like a little cult following. You'll notice that the version of this record that is played on the S&M CD has a little bit of an added twist that the original is missing. And people were speculating in the comments that the added twist, by the way, is like some keys, the it's like somebody like holding some slick sounding keys over top of Thunder. It's alleged that was Jim Hines basically adding like a twisted element into the track on the S&M CD that you're just not going to hear in the original. So if you're familiar with the track from the S&M CD, you buy the original record and you're like, sounds good, but it's like, where's that final little icing on the cake? You're not going to find it on the original, unfortunately. Towards the end of Sound Factory, it started to get a little weird in there. I alluded to this in one of my previous videos. The last time that I saw Jonathan Peters in Sound Factory was in 2003, and the crowd was totally sketch. It was not good. It felt totally unsafe, and it was like Night of the Living Dead in there. It was like, I don't know, a bunch of unhealthy people basically all congealed into one spot, and it wasn't pretty. The music was really lifeless, and you could tell that the entire premise of what Sound Factory was in rapid decline or had already majorly declined. It was a club that was obviously on its way out, and people were starting to not care anymore. That was where it was at. But even within that context, there were still some final gasps of like what made Sound Factory great in the previous years. And to me, this record is one of them. This is a remix of Moby. I barely have any Moby music in my collection. I might have one Moby track, but here is Moby's "In This World" remixed by ATFC, and the track is called the ATFC Deep Southern Dub. Now, I didn't actually hear this played. I heard it in 2003, but I didn't hear it when I was at Factory. I went to see Jonathan at Shampoo in Philadelphia maybe a few months after my bad last visit to Sound Factory. And this was one of the tracks that he really blew up the room with during peak hour. And if you listen to the sound of this, it's like, it's more commercial leaning than really anything that I'm presenting to you in this episode. But at the same time, I do feel like it kind of has like a dark, dirty tinge to it. And I was like, well, why? What is it about it that makes it feel dirty like that? And it's that vocal. If you listen to the vocal, it sounds like an opera singer that basically is holding like kind of like a powerful note for a long period of time. And when I listen to the vocal, it it kind of there's an eeriness because of how long the note is held. When Jonathan played this track at Shampoo, it was like a 20 to 25 minute ordeal where he like just decided to like tee off on the record, for lack of a better term, and like start getting creative with it. So the track in and of itself has a long extended piece where the vocal is held, and I think Jonathan even extended that to a different length, and it just created this like huge amount of tension in the room that finally released when the build drops and the warm, like kind of like disco infused bass line hits the room. I mean, I remember everybody in the room at Shampoo, even though it's like a relatively uneducated crowd in that space, I think because Jonathan was playing that night, there were more like serious heads there. Like everybody reacted to it when that bass line filled the room back up. And it's funny, when I hear the vocal now, it reminds me of the scene in Ace Ventura, the original Ace Ventura, where he's trying to solve the Roger Podacter murder, right? And he's standing in the hotel room, and he has a sliding glass door, and he's like making this like crazy sound with his voice and opening and closing the door to basically prove the point that Roger was thrown over the balcony and then the door was closed afterwards. It kind of, for some reason, it reminds me of that. But anyways, a really a powerful vocal, and like I said, maybe not the darkest and dirtiest track in this episode, but it's definitely got some kind of edge to it. All right, that's all for this Jonathan Peters Dirty Secrets installment. I hope you enjoyed these picks. Let me know if they remind you of any other Sound Factory secret records, and please make recommendations down below. I hope you enjoyed this, and take care.
see every little piece of me. Everything will be a building on fire.